Welcome to FYIdaho, formerly Legislative Watch. Today we're honored to have a very special guest, best-selling author, editor, and speaker, Mr. David Horowitz. Mr. Horowitz received a bachelor's degree from Columbia University in 1959, where he majored in English, and he received his master's degree in English literature from the University of California at Berkeley in 1961. Both of David's parents were teachers and avowed communists, a philosophy he too embraced for years until the 1970s, when he began to change his political views. Since that time, he's become a prolific writer in support of individual liberty and private property. In fact, the David Horowitz Freedom Center, formerly the Center for the Study of Popular Culture, has stated its mission as being to defend America's free society through educating the public to preserve traditional constitutional values of individual freedom, rule of law, private property, and limited government. He's spoken at over 250 colleges and universities and has flown to the Treasure Valley to address audiences at the College of Idaho and Boise State University. He's appeared on Nightline, Crossfire, Today, Hannity and Combs, The Bill O'Reilly Show, and the list goes on and on. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Time constraints limit us in terms of subject matter. I'd like to focus on your views relative to education, and in particular higher education. But first, please tell us a bit about your background and how you converted from Marxism to support of a free society.
My parents were card-carrying members of the Communist Party, and I grew up in a community of communists who all call themselves progressives, as they still do. And I was one of the founders of the New Left in the 1960s. I edited the largest magazine of the left, Ramparts. And in the early 70s, I was introduced to the Black Panther Party, which was described by Tom Hayden and others as the vanguard of the revolution. And is still celebrated today by the left. There have been many television shows. HBO just did one, VH1, celebrating the Panthers as leaders of an oppressed minority. I raised a lot of money for the Black Panthers and bought a church in Oakland's inner city. And turned it into, I called it the Oakland Community Learning Center, and there were 150 Panther children in the school that was housed there. And I recruited my bookkeeper, Betty Van Patter, who was my bookkeeper at Ramparts, left-wing magazine, to do the books for the school because I had made it a non-profit corporation. In December 1974, Betty Van Patter disappeared. And by the time the police fished her body out of San Francisco Bay, I had figured out that the Panthers had killed her, which was confirmed to me by their leader, Huey Newton. Some years later, I've written this whole story in Radical Son, my autobiography. That was the end of my career in the left. I saw the left protected the murderers. The Panthers had murdered another dozen people, all of them black. This didn't matter to the left because they were progressives fighting the good cause.
Why would they kill your secretary?
She was a bookkeeper.
Excuse me.
Well, we don't know. The Panthers were evidently doing all kinds of illegal things. They were all on cocaine. Anyway, they killed her. And that was when I left the left.
Okay, let's talk.
So, I mean, it's a basic lesson. The left has all these noble-sounding things. They're against racism. They're for equality. But in practice, what they do is they defend murderers. They defend gangsters, both internationally, whether it's Joseph Stalin or Nikita Khrushchev or Mao Zedong or Fidel Castro, all murderers on a massive scale. Or Hugo Chavez or even Ahmadinejad and Saddam Hussein. They go out in the streets to protect them and keep them in power. This is who the left is, and it's why I dedicated the rest of my life to fighting.
Let's talk about education, specifically your efforts surrounding the Academic Bill of Rights and your involvement with Students for Academic Freedom.
One of the things the left has done is colonized our universities. They were kind of, a lot of them went into the universities and in university careers to escape the draft because they didn't want to fight the communists during the war in Vietnam. And they stayed and got tenure. These are very privileged jobs. You work 6 or 9 hours a week in classrooms. You get lifetime tenure. If you get tenure, you have a lifetime job. Only Supreme Court justices have that. You only work 8 months out of the year. You make $100,000 or more if you're a full professor. You have wonderful medical, dental perks, and you can bully young people and indoctrinate them. So it's perfect for radicals, and they have colonized our universities. They control the liberal arts schools. They've created entire fields like women's studies and black studies, which are just political parties. They have nothing to do with scholarship or academic work. Because they're ideologies. I mean, if you take a women's studies course, you're not studying women. What you're doing is learning to be a radical feminist. So in our day, when I was in the left in the 60s, I mean, we were at least honest. I mean, we had our own kind of training centers. We didn't use universities. And, of course, they've now moved into the K-12 schools in a big way as our training and recruitment centers. Indoctrinating students betrays the educational mission of a democratic society. Traditionally, and it's crucial that this is so, education in a democratic society teaches you how to think. It doesn't tell you what to think. If you want to be told what to think, you go to the University of Havana or the University of Tehran, and they tell you what to think. Until recently, in American schools, students were left to make up their own minds about controversial issues. Now, at every university with which I'm familiar, and I'm familiar with hundreds, teachers tell students what's the politically correct thing to think, and the politically correct curriculum teaches students that America is a racist, sexist, homophobic, imperialist power that has to be removed, from the equation if any progress is to be made.
You were instrumental in forming the Students for Academic Freedom, which is a national coalition of student organizations. I understand it has over 150 campuses. And their goal is to end political abuse at the university and restore academic integrity. In fact, their motto, education, not indoctrination.
Yeah, our students, I mean, they have an uphill battle because the whole campus environment is controlled by so-called liberals who are only liberal about hard drugs and sex. They're certainly not liberal about people having opinions that differ from theirs. If you have an opinion that differs from the liberals, you're going to be called a racist or a McCarthyite or a sexist or a Republican within 5 seconds of when you do it. They intimidate people.
Well, do you see the numbers growing in the organizations such as these and the Students for Parents?
Well, I have to say I'm very encouraged by recent developments. Conservatives don't organize. They don't like to be in groups that are collective, whereas that's the religion of so-called liberals who are really leftists. And I call them neo-communists because their view of America in the West is identical to what the communists were.